Good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order at exactly 8:30. So let's keep on schedule. That'd be great. First item on the agenda is approval of agenda. Does anybody have anything to add? If not, can I get a motion to approve said agenda? Darcy?
I would move to approve the agenda.
Sorry, Councillor Penner. Thank you.
Darcy's
All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Next item, 1.2, approval of minutes from the September 16th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting. Okay, Councillor Cunningham.
I will move to approve the September 16th, 2025 COW meeting minutes as presented.
Perfect. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. On to number 2, new business, 2.1, 2025 third quarter variance report. Morning, go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, Council. So today I'm bringing forward the third quarter variance report. These reports are intended to communicate where we are at compared to the budget that's been approved by Council for 2025. And it includes reports on both the operating budget and project budgets, as well as some extra appendix items that include information on investments and information on our reserve balances. So the intent of these reports is to report on the performance against the operating budget, report on the status of all projects, both capital and operating, and then also provide that other supplemental information. The first report that we look at is Appendix A, which is the operating budget summary by function. This is kind of the base way we typically look at the operating budget, is when we look at by functional area, so the different categories of revenues in terms of property tax or investment returns, and the different categories of expenses, contracted goods, materials, salaries. So these reports are based on the data to September 30th. And the reason we do 3 quarterly reports every year. We do a second quarter variance report for June, which is typically presented in August. We do a third quarter variance report for the end of September, which is typically presented around this time and intended to be done just before we present the operating budget, so Council knows where we're sitting as compared for 2025. And then we do a fourth quarter variance report, which is typically done end of February, early March, and that one looks at the whole results for the year. I will note when we do the fourth quarter one, those ones are based on unaudited numbers, so there's a few numbers that might shift by the time we actually go through our full financial audit, but by that point we've basically closed the books and they're a pretty good reflection of where we sit. So we also, when you look at Appendix A, so there's 2 kind of sets of columns in that appendix. There's the first set is where we're actually at, where we project to be at for Q3, so the Q3 expected, and then the Q3 actuals, and then the Q3 variance. So those numbers are based on when you look at Q3 expected, we've calendarized the budget. So we've looked at different types of expenses and when they come in, and different types of revenues and when you come in. So we've actually looked at the background and we look at our data and historical data to calendarize the budget so that we're trying to reflect where we really expect to be at each quarter. And then you've got your Q3 actual is where we're actually at as per the books when these numbers were pulled. And then you've got your variance. Now that information is put there for information purposes, but when we look at talking about the actual results, we look at the second set of columns there, which is the 2025 budget and then the year-end forecast and the forecasted year-end variance. And so what that means is we've gone and looked at where are we at as of Q3 or at Q2, and then where do we think we're going to be at year-end. So sometimes something maybe the analysis of history shows that an expense happens more in the front half of the year, and something happened this year where we're going to kind of push some of that back. That's where you kind of capture those fluctuations, where we can kind of then say, actually this is abnormal this year, so we might be showing a different variance at Q3, but what we actually expect to be more on pace by the end of the year. So as I go through this report, we talk about favorable and unfavorable variances. So a favorable variance for revenue means we've got more revenue than we budgeted to get. A favorable variance for expenditures means we've spent less money than we budgeted to spend. And then an unfavorable for revenue, again, is less money in than we thought we would get for that revenue source, or we've spent more on an expenditure than we expected to spend. So if we look at Appendix A, actually, before I get into those details, are there any questions kind of on what Appendix A is and what I've kind of said so far? I know this is the first variance report that this council has seen, so I just want to make sure if there's any questions about what I'm talking about, everyone has an opportunity to ask those so that this is very clear. It's been a little while where I've been doing these with a council who kind of has seen a bunch of them, so if I gloss over something that you'd like more detail on, please feel free and I will explain further. Okay, so then we look at the very big piece on Appendix A is right now we're forecasting a surplus of $2,125,000. Now, the majority of this surplus is actually one-off revenue sources that we expected to get in the budget and are expected to be transferred into reserves. And this is intentionally done so that we're not relying on those revenue sources to fund the operating budget because they're not necessarily sustainable revenue sources. And so when council's gone through budgets in the past, we've strategically kept these amounts low in the budget, and then they get contributed into reserves throughout the year. And that's actually a mechanism of reducing the amount of reserve transfers that we need in the core operating budget. So when you look at that $2.1 million, of that $929,930 relates to reserve or revenue from investment returns. And so that's 43% of that total forecasted surplus. And then there's also an additional $246,000 that relates to capital equipment plan sales. I will note that those amounts are reduced by the amount that you're seeing on the variant on the top end of those revenues. And it's because when you look at contributions to reserves under expenditures, at the Q2 report, a good chunk of both of those surpluses were actually contributed to reserves already. So that leaves, when you kind of take those two one-off revenue sources that again were strategically, we knew that we would get more than we budgeted for, and that that money would go into reserves to fund other initiatives, you actually end up with a total a surplus of about $948,000, which represents a 2.95% variance from the budget overall. And when we look at that as a reasonably healthy variance on your core operating budget. It's a little bit low, it's pretty tight. That means if there's some really unexpected things that come up through the year, we could be at risk of being in a deficit on our core budget when you take out those extra revenue sources. And really when administration is looking at trying to make sure everything stays balanced, we're not taking into account those extra revenues because we're planning on those going into reserves. So we really look at that 2.95% variance as kind of where our driving factors are when we're looking at building the next year budget. So then I'm going to go in to actually talk about each individual revenue source and then each different expenditure class and what the driving factors of any variances in those are. So in revenue, we've got that $3 million surplus, again, mostly related to those one-off revenue sources that are going back into reserves. But we look at licenses and permits, has an $18,452 unfavorable variance. So this relates to planning and development permits that came in a little bit less than we were expecting when we budgeted last year. We've got operating grants, which have a $7,500 unfavorable variance. This is due to a decrease in the ASB grant support from the province. So this is an amount that was reduced when they actually finally signed their grant agreements. They actually reduced that amount in between when we budgeted for 2025 and now. Then we look at other revenue, has a $47,468 unfavorable variance, which primarily relates to industrial water licensing fees. We've had some significant revenues in that area over the last few years, and this year they just didn't materialize. Sales and goods of services has a $50,845 favorable variance. So there's multiple things that are in sales and goods and services. So in this variance, there's a $97,000 favorable variance for water charges, a $16,000 favorable variance for campground revenues, a $10,000 favorable variance for planning department fees, $6,000 related to peace officer call-out revenue, $6,000 related to waste charges, and $4,000 favorable related to various other revenues. So these are small variances in all of these that just aggregate come out to $4,000. And that includes safety codes, cemeteries, paid parking, map sales, bylaw enforcement, weed inspections, oil field permitting, and scrap metal sales. And then we have a $72,000 unfavorable variance in bulk water sales. And again, that's one in the last 2 years. We've seen really high revenues and have adjusted the budget accordingly. And then this year, some of that didn't materialize based on weather and rain and what was needed for whoever uses that bulk water, typically mostly industrial users. And then there's also $16,000 unfavorable for dust control revenues. Then we look at sales to other governments, which has a $31,421 unfavorable variance. This includes $18,000 favorable related to an unbudgeted transfer site agreement. This was something that was missed in the budget last year, but was actually something that we had an agreement for that came in as a revenue source. And then there's a $30,000 favorable related to the Aqua 7 contract. And then there's $75,000 unfavorable. This one was something that was included in the 2025 budget. Council had recommended that we go forward with a management services contract with Carbon. And so there was a revenue source and an offsetting expenditure related to that position, and then that position didn't materialize, so that variance is there.
Go ahead.
So in terms of the carbon management, like I know that it's kind of like it was anticipated that 75,000 would be spent and that's kind of just a wash. But there must have been a cost within that. You know, there was meetings and advertising and stuff like that. So do we know what the cost of that was to have that potential management position that didn't materialize?
Thank you for the question. Through the deputy reef to Councillor Cunningham. Actually, we did not track in-kind costs, but I could go back and see. There was significant in-kind costs. We did do a number of interviews. We advertised twice for the position. And it didn't materialize. So yes, there was a cost to us.
Okay. And then we have a $4,000 unfavorable variance related to various revenues in that class. That includes dispatch services, emergency management reimbursements, and peace officer contracts. Then we look at rental income. There's a $2,463 unfavorable variance. This just relates to building rentals. And then penalties and fines has an $84,435 favorable variance. So this is related to property taxes due to higher than anticipated arrears balances. Last year we had a lower amount. We adjusted that revenue accordingly. This year we had some higher balances, which resulted in some more revenue on there.
Do you mind if I just ask a question specifically about that number then? So typically is that an unusually high number over the last 10 years, that number? I guess what I'm getting at is it a canary in the coal mine telling us that we have ratepayers that are in financial stress?
Through the deputy reeve, actually, a few years ago, that number was significantly higher. We had a lot of outstanding oil and gas amounts for property taxes that were resulting in higher revenues there, most of which actually subsequently were written off. That is higher than we saw last year. Last year, we saw some pretty low numbers, and that was actually, we'd recently implemented a new bylaw related to how we did penalties on taxes. It was higher than we expected to see this year, but it's certainly something that we would monitor ongoing to see. I think the majority is still a couple oil and gas ones, but there's certainly some that are residential and farmland related as well. But I could pull some information on historical penalties too. Absolutely. And then we go to property taxes, has a $15,892 unfavorable variance. This relates to assessment adjustments. So when we do the property tax bylaw, we base it on a certain amount of our assessment. There's things called 305s that come out throughout the year that adjust assessment, and so there's always a little bit of variance in property taxes, sometimes up, sometimes down, based on those adjustments throughout the year. And then we look at special taxes and frontage, has a $27,663 favorable variance. So this includes $39,000 favorable related to riser connections. These are actually something that we don't include in the budget each year because they're really unpredictable how many riser connection fees we might collect. And it is something that during the Q4, like the fourth quarter report, we typically recommend to council to contribute any of those amounts into the water reserve to fund future infrastructure needs for the water services. And then there's an $11,000 unfavorable variance due to adjustments in the Trochu special levy. This is a levy that's done through bylaw, and so it's one that we budget for based on the prior year amount, and then we end up with a bill, and then it sometimes is up or down. Last year, we actually had over levied a little bit, and then they dropped the amount, so that's where that variance has come from. And then any amount that's off for next year will be again adjusted in the bylaw, and it just continues to go that way. And then we have return on investments. This is that first driver of that significant variance, is $1,610,687 favorable. So this is the projection to year end. Again, this variance aligns with the preliminary reserve strategy that was presented to council in October of 2023, where we were looking at reducing the reliance on investment returns to fund the operating budget and transferring them over to funding reserves. And this is just a way one thing we saw is when COVID hit, we'd had investment returns built into the operating budget that didn't materialize because the prime rate dropped so much. And so we had an unfavorable variance in investment returns that affected that year's budget. And so as we move forward, and again, that was something that was presented to council 2 years ago. As we look at this, that's still something that council can amend how they want to see that work. But when that's a flexible revenue source, there's some benefit to having it fund reserves rather than fund your operating budget. Because if something happens in the economy and we lose some of those investment returns, then it's not affecting your core operating budget and having to figure out how to balance as a result of that. So during the second quarter variance report, council motioned to contribute $680,757 of that variance to reserves, which represented the income above the expected amount as of June 30th. And administration will, again, when we come back with the Q4 report, will know the exact amount of revenue that we've received over budget, and council can then choose to put that into reserves. And then we have capital equipment plan sales, which has a $1,367,829 favorable variance. Again, this is the sale of capital equipment. Council motioned during the Q2 report to contribute $1,120,898 to the capital equipment plan reserve. Again, this is one where we typically in the budget, we have a $100,000 budget and a $100,000 contribution to reserves. We know we're going to sell more than that in equipment each year, but then we put it back into reserves. And the reason we don't adjust this budget every year is then it looks, if we are going to sell a lot of equipment one year, that amount looks really high one year and then drops more the next year. And it makes it so that the base operating budget isn't as stable. And that's something that's really nice to be able to see, is to not have those one-off fluctuations within your operating budget, because it's a little bit easier to compare year to year that way. So that comes to the end of revenues. Before I move on to expenses, are there any questions? Okay. So we have an unfavorable variance in expenditures of $892,457. Now that's a little bit misrepresentative, because there's $1.8 million of unfavorable variance in expenses, which is actually us putting money into reserves as our savings. So it's a little bit, it's not truly an unfavorable variance overall with expenditures. So the driving factors of this variance are contract goods and services has a $315,749 favorable variance. There are several contributing factors to that. $68,000 relates to professional fees. A portion of this is due to a reimbursement by the AUC for some of our legal fees. We also have $63,000 favorable for training, conferences, and memberships, $48,000 favorable for advertising and PR, $41,000 favorable for major maintenance, $25,000 favorable for waste collection fees, $20,000 favorable for the public land mowing contract, $18,000 favorable for building repair and maintenance, $13,000 favorable related to freight and postage, $12,000 related to land care programming, $9,000 favorable for IT contracts, $8,000 favorable for inspection services, $6,000 favorable for election expenses, $4,000 favorable and for payment services, and then there's $8,000 favorable for miscellaneous items, including licenses and permits, contracted grounds maintenance, land and building rentals, equipment rentals, and urban garbage site expenses. Then we have $16,000 unfavorable for contracted vehicle and equipment maintenance, $7,000 unfavorable for council training and conferences, and $4,000 unfavorable for insurance.
Go ahead.
Okay. Just because I sat here last term, I'm just curious with the 7,000 unfavorable for council training, was there, do we know, like, was that conferences or unplanned training or, oh, Jerry knows the answer. I would just be curious to know what we didn't, yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Whitstock.
Sorry, Councillor Cunningham, I do not know the answer to that one, but I did have a question for Ms. Von Burback on what was the percentage that the AUC reimbursed us on the professional or on our legal fees? And that was just my question.
Through the chair for both of those, I would have to look into the council one. I believe, my guess is it's the council turnover and a little bit of training related to that, and we under budgeted a little bit less than what we could have expected to see. It can also be things like how many councillors went to conferences, whether something didn't quite align with historical trending, but I can absolutely look into that. And I would have to look into the legal fee reimbursement too as well, but I've written it on my list, so I'll come back with that. Okay, then we have materials, goods, supplies, and utilities, has a $247,922 favorable variance. Again, there's numerous contributing factors here. There's $147,000 favorable related to shop supplies for maintenance on county vehicles and equipment, $69,000 favorable for fuel, $59,000 favorable for general goods, small tools, and supplies across all departments, $35,000 favorable for road maintenance supplies, $22,000 favorable for utilities, $18,000 favorable for steel products like culverts and grater blades, $11,000 favorable for utility department supplies, $100,000 unfavorable for water for resale. This one you will have seen there's a positive variance on the revenue side. And then there's a $13,000 unfavorable for dust control materials. And we look at, yeah.
Councillor McCook, go ahead.
Yeah, just quick questions on this stuff. Like, it's hard for a guy to relate favorable to expenditures. It doesn't even make sense, really. But are you saying that when you're telling us that these are favorables, that's what you have left in that budget?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
That's calculated all the way through to the end of the season, or to our cutoff, and then that stuff that's left over goes back into reserve?
Through the chair, yes. So at this point, these are amounts that we're projecting to have at year end. They can fluctuate a little bit if something comes up that we didn't expect when we did this report. But yes, when at the end of the year, when any surplus is then recommended to be contributed to reserves. And we also look at things like these variances. We look at where is the 2026 budget coming in? Are we seeing trending? Was it a one-off trend that we wouldn't expect to see next year? Is it an ongoing trend and then the budget needs to be reflected accordingly? So those are things we use as administration to inform how the next year's budget is developed too.
Councillor Olson, go ahead.
Yeah, just in regards to the overall budget for this materials, goods, supplies, and utilities at almost 5 million. Is that something that we're seeing trending up all the time? Or is it or is our budget near there most of the time?
Through the chair, it's depended year to year. We've had a couple years where that has actually decreased and a couple years where that's gone up. I can actually bring forward when we look at bringing forward the next year budget, we look at kind of how those amounts have trended over years and what they all break out down into and what it makes them up, absolutely. Okay. Next, we look at salaries, has a $274,370 favorable variance. The majority of this, $145,000 of this is related to that management services contract that did not proceed with carbon, so that amount has not been spent in that budget. And then there's a $129,000 favorable variance related to core salaries, group benefits, seasonal wages, overtime, and employee turnover. Then we look at provision for allowances, has a $37,980,000, wow. It's a favorable variance related to tax write-offs due to uncollectible accounts. So this one, we had a $100,000 budget. We didn't need to write off that much of taxes. This is actually one that's a fairly good news story in the last few years. A couple years ago, that budget was $1.1 million. And that was related to how many uncollectible accounts we were having from industry. And so we've actually seen a really positive trend. There's been really proactive collection processes, and actually council's been really proactive of entering into tax agreements with companies that aren't able to pay their taxes. And so we've actually seen a really positive trend in this amount in the last few years. Then we look at purchases from other governments, has a $9,545 unfavorable variance. This relates to an unbudgeted Drumheller Waste Commission payment increase. We've got transfers to other governments, which has a $17,236 favorable variance, includes variances for fire agreements and the Trochu special levy. We have transfers to individuals and organizations, which has a $25,484 favorable variance, which relates to grant programming, which is not anticipated to be fully utilized. And then we have contributions to reserves. Again, this is this $1.8 million. It says unfavorable because it's technically an expense over what we budgeted for, but because it's transfers to reserves, that's money going into savings. So it's actually a positive variance in the big picture. That comes to the end of Appendix A. I do have Appendix B, which is the same operating budget, but just categorized by department, and I've highlighted the driving factors of those variances. Does council want me to go through all of those? I haven't always done that when presenting the report. I'm happy to, but it is really up to council.
How would you like to proceed with that? Anybody?
I'm in favor of not going through it. We can go through this on an individual basis, because this is the one that tells the tales. I'm okay with that if everybody else is.
I am. Okay,
Okay.
we're good.
Then I will move on to Appendix C, which is your operating project summary. We have 23 operating projects that are being undertaken in 2025. Some of these are ones that were carried forward from 2024. Some of these were approved in the core 2025 budget approval. And so this appendix shows each project's name and their budget, expenditures to date, the funding sources, the projected final cost, the projected variance, the start date, the end date, and comments on project status. Overall, we're looking at a favorable variance of $369,513, which is approximately 20% of the total operating project budget. The contributing factors are 13 have no projected variance based on the project progress as of September 30th, and 10 are projected to be completed under budget. And any operating projects, so one of the things we do is we fund all projects out of reserves. This means if the funding for the project isn't fully utilized, that money stays in reserves. So the reserve money is only pulled out as the expenditures are incurred. Are there any questions on operating projects before I look at the capital project listing?
Through the Deputy Reeve to Council, when we look at this operating project list, what we have done, there's just one update. The Horseshoe Canyon Area Structure Plan has been put on hold, so we've paused that RFD for now to allow council to give us more direction in the new budget. So just so you know, that money won't be going forward in this budget.
Thank you. Councilor McCook?
Without trying to read through everything, are these projects already just about done?
Most of them are, yes.
Okay, so my question would be, this wouldn't be part of that pre-approval budget that was set forth? That's totally different? Thanks.
Through the chair, and actually council will see another updated version of these listings next week when we look at carrying forward any projects that are currently approved within 2025 and are not complete, and we're looking at carrying them forward into 2026. Yes, and that is for this listing of projects. The pre-approval projects are something that has been approved by council for preemptively for 2026, and they already have approval to carry forward in 26 unless council adjusts that.
That would be my thought. We talked about that. I thought our hands would be tied on a $20 million budget that we haven't even had no say on. So I was assured that through the CAO, interim CAO, that we do have an option on that.
Through the Deputy Reeve took all of council, yes, we can bring that pre-approval budget back. Some things have been started, so there are tenders that have been, like some of our vehicle and our asset purchases that take quite a long time to come, but there certainly are a number of projects that haven't even started that you'll be able to review. Well, we can bring that back. Is it reasonable to include it with the December 9th? Okay, we'll bring it back with the budget next week.
Okay. Then we look going into Appendix D. So there are 31 capital projects in 2025. Again, these are ones that were either approved in the 2025 budget or they were carried forward from 2024 if they weren't complete yet. Again, they have details on the name, the budget, the expenditures to date, the funding source, projected final cost, projected variance, start date, end date, and comments on the status. Overall, we're looking at a favorable variance of $1,330,006, which is approximately 8% of the total capital projects budget. The contributing factors of that are 14 have no projected variance based on the project progress as of September 30th, and 17 are projected to be completed under budget. Any capital projects, again, completed under budget will reduce the funding drawn from the reserve or the amount of grant funding utilized for the projects. So again, next week, council will actually see an updated version of this with spending to date and any projects that we are calling complete at year end, we will not need carry forward funding, and any projects that we are hoping to carry forward into next year to complete. And then that will be a council decision during the 9th council meeting. And I will also bring forward those pre-approval projects as well as a separate appendix item at that report. Absolutely. So then we move on, there's just two more appendix items. That these ones are really supplemental information. They aren't necessarily against the budget, but they just provide council with a bit more information. The first one is Appendix E, is the cash and investment summary. So it just lists the county's bank accounts and any investments that have been made and what those returns are. Currently, we have range of returns from 3.05% to 6%. And again, these rates of return, especially in the bank accounts, are going to drop again in Q4 as the prime interest rate drops. But we have some healthy investments. We have some strategy around when they mature. And those amounts are really what the nice thing the county has is these numbers show that our reserves are actually cash backed. And that isn't something that is actually the case in all municipalities. So we actually, when you look at the next schedule that has our reserve balances, we've actually the county has cash to back those balances. It's not held up in any way, which is a really healthy financial indicator for the county. So we look at the reserve schedule. It tracks the opening balance for 2025. It tracks the operating budget contributions and the draws that were approved within the budget. So that includes draws to balance the budget, draws for projects. And then you've also got a section for council motions. So there's a column that looks at motions that were made during the Q2 report, the pre-approval project motions, and then other motions that have been made by council to withdraw money from reserves. And then you look at that 2025 available balance, and then there's the projected surplus or deficit of 2025 projects. That one's included there as based on this status, we expect $1.6 million to go back into reserves when these projects are complete. That brings me to the end of my presentation or my report today. Are there any further questions from council?
Councillor Cunningham, go ahead.
So I'm just going back up to page 3, sales to other governments, and it said we had a $30,000 favorable for the Aqua 7 contract. Just curious, did something change with that contract from when it was initially done, or what would be the explanation on that?
Through the chair, I believe that's where that was driven from, is that, and this, it happens with lots of budget items. We develop, like the operating budget is actually developed in between like July and in a normal year, September. And so there's often information that comes forward after those numbers are developed that end up with these fluctuations. But that's one of the reasons we bring these reports back to council, is so that council knows what's changed throughout the year based on what actually was budgeted for.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? I guess that's complete. Thank you very much. And now I ask for a motion to accept the variance report. Councillor Olson?
I'll make a motion that we accept the variance report as presented.
All in favor? Oh, I guess discussion, was that a discussion, Councillor Woodstock, or a vote?
No, that is a discussion. Because we are in committee of the whole, the recommended motion would be to recommend to council to accept the 2025 third quarter variance report, because council will be making the motion probably in our next council meeting, so we have to recommend to council. So I was just going to bring that up.
Okay, that makes sense, yes. Councillor Olson?
Yeah, I'll change that motion then based on what Councillor Woodstock had mentioned, so that the motion would be that the committee of the whole recommend to council to accept the 2025 third quarter variance report for information.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Next item on the agenda, 2.2 Environmental Services Overview. Welcome. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, council. This morning, as part of our ongoing information sessions for council, I bring forth the Environmental Services Department for some information and some discussion for you. So to begin, I would just like to kind of introduce the department as an overview. So basically our department, we are water, wastewater, and solid waste is under the purview of environmental services. That includes 6 full-time employees and 4 part-time employees. Our water employees are certified in both water treatment, distribution, wastewater treatment, and wastewater collection. And our 1 full-time solid waste operator is certified for landfills, for the Landfill Act there. So we do have the certification there, and our 4 part-time employees are attendants at the sites that usually work 1 or 2 days a week, kind of thing. So some of the duties that our operators kind of undertake as part of our water systems and that sort of thing is we have compliance checks that we have to complete daily. That's just a requirement we need to do. Part of that's weekly bacteriological sampling, quarterly THM testing, yearly water analysis, and basically anything else that's required by the code of practice to maintain our systems as required. We also respond to resident inquiries. Those include things like if they have a pressure issue, if they have maybe a small leak or maybe a sewer issue, that sort of thing. We reply to those and we mitigate what we can through that. As well with water lines, there's always that potential of water leaks. So we do have water main breaks that we do attend to and repair. And that's usually done in conjunction with our operations department who provide the equipment for us to dig down and repair those lines as we need. As well, some of the smaller things, like, I guess not smaller things, but other things that may not really think of as in normal duties is the monthly meter readings, the first calls that we have to respond to just to protect our infrastructure from other people when they're digging in or around those lines. We also install new services on our water lines, either sewer or water, depending if they're in the hamlets or not. We also release our lagoons on a yearly basis if needed, when needed. So that also takes some testing and some time and that sort of thing. We have to do it underneath the code of lagoons. And again, just general maintenance. We have a lot of equipment, mechanical equipment, so we have scheduled preventative maintenance, greasing, test running, things like that, just to kind of keep it going. And also to complete, we also do have to report monthly to Alberta Environment on all of our results of our testings and that sort of thing. So another thing on our water side as well is that we are contracted to the Aqua 7 Water Commission. So we do perform the maintenance and the operation within the pump house as well as on the distribution line. And that distribution line for the Aqua 7 is approximately 90 kilometers and runs from just outside of Drumheller at Kirkpatrick all the way to Arikana is where that pipeline runs. And it services those communities in between, such as Carbon, Acme, Linden, Arikana, Bicycle, that sort of thing. So our transfer site attendants, part of their daily duties is maintaining the sites, greeting the residents, making sure that what's coming into that site is acceptable, what's not acceptable, and if it's not acceptable, then providing information that may help them redirect where they need to go to offload that material. They'll provide assistance to residents, maybe if they're unable to offload, they'll help offload. So they're there to basically be the face of the county as people arrive and help as needed. So just a little bit on the water systems and that sort of thing. Anything that's kind of regulated by the regulatory bodies like Alberta Environment, the Fisheries Act, that sort of thing. We are the system owners and operators. Council's kind of almost the ultimate owner of those. So we do our daily stuff so that we maintain those requirements. So we don't come back on us and, there is different levels of I guess you could call it punishments from them if we fall out of compliance. Usually it's a letter, contravention letter kind of thing, but it can get serious. It can get up to fines, and operators actually personally can be fined themselves, and personally, if it's very severe, like if you know about Walkerton, they can spend time in jail too for these things. So it's serious that we do keep up that certification, so people are always in the know, always kind of have that knowledge to do what we need to do to make sure that our systems are running as they're supposed to through these codes of practices. So for example, our main kind of like our little guidebook are the code of practices, and these lay out basically our daily, monthly, yearly duties that we have to perform. But then we also have certain things like the Water Act, the Fisheries Act, things like that. So when we release a lagoon, we need to make sure that that water releasing is not going to affect any kind of life inside those water bodies we're releasing to. As well as the landfills, we have the 1 Class 3 landfill. There's also a code of practice for that. And that's where, things like where the attendants might ask for a sorted load. That's because we can't take certain materials in that landfill. Otherwise, again, there could be fines and things that come down the line because our Class 3 landfill isn't built like a Class 2 landfill where it collects leachate and stuff like that. So if that stuff starts getting into our groundwater, then we have some issues that we have to attend to. So we do have quite a few legislations in this area that we do have to abide by. And I'll also mention, we do get inspected through this to make sure that we are abide buying it, and those inspections then will also, if there's something we're not doing or something we have to do better, then we adjust just to make sure that we're maintaining our compliance. So our water systems, we have 13 separate licensed water systems. We have approximately 900 kilometers of water pipeline within those systems. That includes both the rural systems and the hamlet systems. We have 9 water reservoirs and pump houses along those systems. There are a few systems that are connected directly from another municipality's distribution system. So that's where there's a little bit of a difference there. As well, we operate 2 booster stations and 5 bulk water stations. So a little breakdown, so 2 of our systems are groundwater systems. That's the hamlet of Huxley and the hamlet of Winborn. And we also then have 11 surface water systems. Those systems are either supplied through the town of Drumheller Water Treatment Plant or supplied to the town of Three Hills Water Treatment Plant. So in 2000, and so a little bit of history here, in 2004, Kneehill County started to undertake the development and construction of these rural water lines and these systems to basically provide safe, reliable, potable water to rural residents. These designs, they were basically designed to offer a full flow, full pressure system, which was 4 imperial gallons per minute at 40 PSI. And these were theoretically designed to mimic a urban system, but in a rural setting. And they were deemed to be able to sufficiently supply a household with the typical water needed to run typical appliances, showers, things like that, right? So with these systems, they also weren't designed for fire protection. So these rural systems, we can't have any kind of fire protection off it, so it's, we just don't have the capacity in the lines and things like that to provide that kind of a service on it, so. So under these parameters of that full flow, full pressure system of 4 imperial gallons per minute, there was 6 water systems that were constructed out of this. That was the Sunny Slope gravity system, which was previously called Linden North. That was the first one. That was done in 2005. Our second one was the Gamble water system in 2008, and that includes the hamlet of Swalwell. So the hamlet of Swalwell gets the water through the Gamble system. Our third one was it's called the Granger water system, and that was done in 2009. That's kind of the south central area, kind of at the south bottom of the county. In 2009, we did what we called our Kirkpatrick system. It's our smallest system. That's kind of like in the southeast corner of the county, servicing those homes along kind of the Red Deer River in that area. In 2010, our Selkirk system. This is kind of the southwest area of the county, kind of in capsules like around Acme and that sort of thing, and north, although we don't service Acme, but it's just that area that encompasses that part of it. And then our last one that we completed was in 2010 as well. Kind of the dates are 2010s, but one was early 2010, one was later 2010. And that was what we call our Sunny Slope North. This Sunny Slope North also services the hamlet of Torrington. Some other systems that I haven't touched on, they were not constructed by us, but maybe taken over by us, so like some co-ops. So our Churchill area, yes.
Mr. McCook has a question?
Okay.
Councilor McCook.
I see that the central and south areas of the county are fairly looked after with water. Reasoning for nothing going north?
Through the chair. I believe back when they were in the process of looking into these, they did do a kind of a water kind of analysis of the county. And I think it was felt at that time that the southern part was in more need than the north at that time. So they started constructing those. In the recent past, we did look at including what we would call, I guess, Three Hills East, like beyond Mount Vernon and around Mount Vernon, to include them. And the costs and availability of grants and stuff wasn't there. So it was decided not to pursue it at that time. But always definitely, if there's an area of need that people are looking at, we can look at that kind of thing.
I was just, yeah, thanks. I have had people with concerns basically along the river. There's no water. And I didn't know whether I presume that we did have meetings out there, and it did take a lot of money or something, and nothing happened so far. But
Right, through the chair, we did have a meeting, a little community meeting. I don't remember the exact timeline. I'm going to say it was 5 years. The COVID thing all kind of messes me up. Where we did have people come in and they did express their interest in it. And then we did, off of that, go and look into building a system to the east. Costs and that sort of thing, I think, might have deferred that project at that time, so we didn't pursue it further than the investigation part.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Whitstock, sorry for keeping your hand up so long.
No, that's not a problem. What I was going to say is the reason that these systems are where they are, why there isn't water systems to the north, is because there was a PFRA study done back in the 90s, and that set the parameters of where water was needed. And that is actually the study that was used to determine where these water lines were going to go. Some of that stuff east by the river, the way it worked out is that it wasn't economical to send water systems or to send water that way. But that's just what the PFRA study showed. So as Reeve McCook was asking how we determined it, it was through a PFRA study that was done in the 90s. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Cunningham.
Just a little bit further to the Three Hills East, yeah, that was during the last term, because that was one that I advocated pretty hard for. With that one, yeah, we did have a really large meeting actually in Three Hills. We had a great turnout, but I think it was a combination of the cost, which of course everything costs way more than it did even 5 years ago. And the other thing was with that one, we had a threshold, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but we had to have a certain amount of buy-in for Three Hills East. And unfortunately, we didn't meet that threshold. So, and that was the agreement of council to meet that threshold. I know there's still interest out that way, and there's definitely interest in a bulk water station, but that's a conversation for another day.
Right, through the chair, we did send out information and people to respond back if they're in favor or not in favor, and it unfortunately didn't meet the threshold that council had set forth to pursue as well, so. So just carrying on our water systems there, so I kind of went over, those are mostly the Aqua 7 fed water systems. We did take over water co-ops throughout the years as well. So those were small little systems that the locals in the area got, put together a little board, got the money together, built a water system. Those include our Churchill water system. In 2008, we took that over. That's from, basically it was in the 80s, 87-ish area when that was actually developed. We also took over, Equity's a little bit different. We didn't really take it over, but we had an opportunity to join with the Trans Pan line, I think it is, that runs from Three Hills almost to Trochu. Well, now it is to Trochu. So we had an opportunity to branch off of that, and that's where Equity came from. That was about in 2008. Mount Vernon, that was originally a co-op as well in 1996. And in 2008, we took over operations for them as well. So the reasoning usually for taking over co-ops is requirements through the regulatory bodies. Usually you need certified operators to operate the systems. You have to be able to do the testing and stuff, so that usually became a burden on these co-ops, and so we usually went in, took over those operations and brought them into our fold.
Counselor,
yes.
Counselor Olson.
So just a broader question that I don't expect you to answer, but I mean, with us taking over these water systems and stuff, like, what is there a benefit to Kneehill County, like financially? And this is maybe more to the acting CAO, or are we just, is this more of a service for Kneehill County?
Right. So through the chair, that would probably be more of on the service end of things, that there was people that had a water system were no longer able to operate it under the new regulations or the evolving regulations. I don't know financially if it's any different than any of our other water systems kind of thing, right? So it was more of a residents have this that's in place, and so we just took that as under our belts as a service that we provide.
Go ahead.
Through the Deputy Reeve to all of council, I'll just add to that. It is in our best interest, if these water co-ops aren't being managed effectively by the residents, for us to take them over to ensure a life and safety of our residents. In terms of revenue, different systems create different revenues, but it's not definitely a moneymaker for us. It's a service we provide to residents to help them drink water. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so the next slide there, I just thought I'd put in a little bit of information on our utility accounts, what we currently have, and our basically our projected connection rates on each system. We currently have about 842 active utility accounts, and we have about just over 1,300 risers or connections that are installed. So there is some that aren't being used, and those were just part of the build on our systems that we've been doing since about 2008. So we're at about a 64% connection rate overall. So on that chart, you'll see a lot of our hamlets, I mean, give or take 1 or 2 non-connections per month, just because renters might move out. So all of a sudden it's not an active account, but the service is still there. Next month, someone might be renting it, now it's an active account. But so our hamlets and our co-ops are basically 100%, because the co-ops we just took over, and they were built just to who wanted the water. So they're at 100%. Our newer systems, they were put in, and each resident received a curb stop. Not every resident has connected as of yet. It is going that way, but you can see where where they're trending there, kind of thing. So we're working on it, but there still is some out there that aren't connected. So moving on, I just thought I would kind of go through some of our water systems, just so you have a bit of a visual of our systems and a little bit of knowledge. So the first one is our Huxley water system. So this is one of our groundwater systems. We basically, you call it, I guess, high-quality groundwater is the code of practice we're under. And so high-quality groundwater code of practice limits, we don't have to do much for treatment-wise. We basically add a bit of chlorine, make sure that the contact time is done, so the viruses and all that stuff are taken care of. But other than that, we don't do anything like filtration or anything like that. We just carry on. So the Huxley water system is drawn from a well, which is inside that building on the top there. From there, chlorine is added, and then it's pushed up to our reservoir that's on top of a hill just east of the hamlet. And from there, it's gravity fed back down into the hamlet itself. The one thing about the hamlet of Huxley is we used to have a bulk water station there. We no longer have that. We decommissioned it just because of our water diversion license. We were always over top of that, and that's one of the contraventions of the aquifer that's there. So we limited the bulk station, and with that, it brought that underneath our license, so we're not in contravention of that any longer. We did look at, yes.
Got one question, Councillor McCook, go ahead.
So that diversion amount that we are allowed to take out, can we get more? Are we allowed to apply for more? Because that bulk station was critical to the area.
Right, so through the chair, we did, at the time, before we closed it down, we did look into what our other option was, and it was to look into a increase in our diversion license. It did involve an extensive study on the aquifer itself. So at that time, it was chosen to just go the option of closing the bulk station.
Can we just make a note on that? I'd like to bring that back to council, or to have a look at that again, please. Thanks.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry. Huxley, you got fire protection?
Through the chair, it technically kind of does. There are a few points, because it is gravity fed, that you're not going to get that high pressure from a fire pump, but you'd be able to fill a tanker and use your tanker pressure, I guess, but you wouldn't be able to draft right off those hydrants and maintain the pressure that you need.
Yeah,
So they're just for show?
No.
slow fill.
They also, with that, we can also actually achieve a bit of velocity where we can flush our lines through those as well. So fire hydrants aren't only for fire protection, although that's kind of the big one, it's also for system maintenance such as flushing and that sort of thing, so.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think at some point in the future there, at the fire chief's quarterly meeting, we'd like to have water come in and tell us a little bit about the systems in Torrington, Wimborne, Huxley, Swalwell, just so that we know what we've got there for water, what we can and can't do, so that everybody's on the same page, so that we don't collapse a line or, you know, somebody hooks onto a hydrant in Huxley and starts to draft and collapses a line, then we've got a major problem. So if we could get you or another representative to come out and give us a presentation as to what we can and can't do as a fire service,
Yeah.
that would be good.
So through the chair, we actually, well, Wimborne, not gonna happen because there's actually no fire hydrants in Wimborne. And we only have about a 27 cubic meter reservoir, so we'd have zero capacity in Wimborne. So Torrington and Swalwell, we're actually just completing a couple infrastructure studies, and that fire question is answered in those. Preliminary, they're both able to supply fire. There are a couple sections that might have a little bit issues, but that's gonna be brought to council for, you know, for information and maybe future projects and things like that. So things like that, definitely, if you want us to come, we'll have that information, yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, so that's kind of Huxley. It's, like I said, it's kind of a basic system, groundwater. Put a little bit of chlorine in there, and then we send it on its way kind of thing. Our second system I'd just like to go over is Wimborne as well. So again, this is our second groundwater. Our license for diversion there does restrict what we can use, but we don't come near to this one. So whatever calculations they made on the two different ones, this one is no problems. As I just kind of mentioned, there isn't any fire protection in this hamlet. There's no hydrants, there's no water capacity for it either. So that makes it not able to have that fire protection. In this groundwater, and there is a project on the books that we're kind of in the middle of, and that's this water in this aquifer has naturally occurring high fluoride. In the past, we've been given an exemption for this through the regulatory bodies, but they've decided that that exemption is no longer going to be carried forward. So we had to come up with a plan, how are we going to reduce the fluoride in this water? We settled on a filtration system, an RO filtration system, that would blend filtered water with the current well water, which would then bring our fluoride underneath that maximum allowable concentration. As well, benefits to this, it also reduces the sodium, it reduces the ammonia. With the ammonia reduction, then it also reduces our need for our higher dosaging of chlorine. So there's benefits to this as well. We did look into other options like putting in a water line, let's say from Torrington up to Wimborne. The cost was higher than it, and then there was also operational issues such as Wimborne doesn't use a lot of water, so now we have about I think it's about 15 kilometers between Torrington and Wimborne. Now we got a lot of stagnant water that can actually cause issues with algae buildup, things like that, just because we don't have it. So we'd be probably wasting more water than what we would be using just to maintain that water quality. So that's why we went with the filtration. Right now, that is in with the regulatory body, provincial regulatory body, to get approval to upgrade that filtration inside that pump house, and that unfortunately does take some time. So our next system is our equity water system, our equity regional water system. So this one, we only have control over our branch lines. So there is an old, I guess it would have been from a gas or oil company back in the 80s, 90s, that used to run water from Town of Three Hills up to their site. They no longer needed it, so Town of Three Hills took it over. We built branch lines off of that to service residences within that area, and eventually Trochu then also extended that line and connected their town to it as well. So pictured is the boosters pumps shack that's basically just on the border of the Town of Three Hills. That boosts the water going up that main line. We do have another booster station closer towards Trochu that can also boost it in times of need. So basically, if Trochu is pulling a lot of water, we feel the effects in our branch lines where there's some people that are with a trickle of water coming out. So once that Luma booster gets turned on, then we're usually satisfied. But since we don't have control over either of those booster stations, we normally don't know that's happening until one of our residents calls us and lets us know that, hey, I got no water. So then we got to go through the town of Three Hills and get them to go and fix our booster stations. So there is an agreement in place between ourselves and the town of Three Hills for that supply of water, volume, usually costs and how the cost can be worked out and that sort of thing. I don't know the expiry date on there. I think we may have done one where it could be just reviewed every so often. The contract's in it, or the agreement's gonna stay in place, but it's reviewed every so often type thing. So they can't just cut us off and say, next week you got no water. There's stipulations where they can't do that to us, so. On this, we do not have any water storage capacity, so we don't, anything that we get is directly off town of Three Hills distribution. So if they have issues, we have issues, kind of thing, right? So, example was when they had those pump house problems a few years back. Unfortunately, Equity went on to boil water because we were basically an arm length of their distribution. So we are a little bit at their mercy, but it runs fairly well for the most part. Our next system is the Mount Vernon water system, and again, this one is delivered right off of the water distribution lines of the town of Three Hills. Again, there's no water storage here, so we are at the, what they can deliver us is what we can get. The pictures on the top there, that's kind of our little electronics cabinet, so that basically is our flows, our pressures that we can get out of the booster station, which is an underground vault just on that service road just outside of the Bigfoot. It's inside that little crescent area of that service road right at the end. From there, it pumps out across the highway and goes into Mount Vernon. We took ownership of this booster station in 2020. So we actually, before Town of Three Hills operated it and all that, but in 2020, we took over the ownership of that, and now with a few upgrades, there were some issues with water hammer, backflow, stuff like that. So we took it over and we did do a few minor upgrades to it to ensure that we weren't getting those fluctuations within the system itself. For the most part, this system runs fairly well. There are times of the year where there is some, unrestricted, larger services that pull quite a deal of water that do affect some of our smaller users on that system. So that's usually a few times a year kind of thing that happens. This system also supplies water to that Brackeneers Dam campground as well. Good. I'm just gonna, keep going and go through our Churchill, our water systems, just to kind of give you guys a bit of a little information thing. Our next one is the Churchill system. So this one is just off Highway 9, basically up by Drumheller there as you come out in that area. It started out as a co-op, and again, we took it, the county started operating it in 2006. So we started taking that over. Originally, this system was designed only for 33 users, but through the design phase and stuff before we took it over, more people were connecting on it, but the system itself wasn't upgraded. So eventually we were running into issues where we couldn't meet demand. So in 2014, we actually built a reservoir and pump house there so that we could control our volumes and stuff. So when we had those issues, we still had that capability of supplying our residents. As well with that, if you're familiar, our booster station, that was the headworks of our whole system before we did the pump house. It was after the speedway at Drumheller, I think it's called Dinosaur Downs. And if they had an event and they were pulling, they would basically leave us zero water. So on a Saturday morning, we'd start getting calls about people with no water, but that's because Dinosaur Downs was spraying their track for their event. So we, again, that was another reason for building this reservoir and pump house inside the waterworks system. So now we're able to provide without any incidents. At this site, we do have a bulk water station available as well. Our next one is our Kirkpatrick Waterworks. Now, this is our smallest system that we own, our smallest rural system. This one has no reservoir or anything like that, but is pumped directly out of Aqua 7's reservoir. So inside Aqua 7's pump house, we have our small little corner with our couple little pumps and our chlorine analyzers and all that kind of thing. And we pump directly out of that reservoir to these residents. And this services those residents mostly along the river down there by the Kirkpatrick area. And that was began operations in 2010. So our next system to go through is, we call it our Gamble Waterworks system. So this is the first system that is actually under the umbrella of Kneehill Southern Rural Water System. So under that one, we have Gamble, Granger, Selkirk, Swalwell. They're kind of all underneath that umbrella, but they're separately licensed. So this one is kind of services the area just north of Carbon, east and west a bit there. The location of this pump house is just off Highway 836, just as you're kind of going down into Carbon. We're on the west side of the highway there. We do have a bulk water station capabilities at this site as well. Operations began in 2009 on this. This is one of our systems that Aqua 7 services for water, so we purchase water through Aqua 7. And on this total system, we have approximately about 147 kilometers of HDPE pipeline, and our reservoir is about 600 cubes, and it's an underground reservoir, this one. We only have a couple underground. Most of our other ones are above ground. So as I said a little bit earlier, Swalwell, this is the connection from Aqua 7, and through the distribution system, Swalwell receives their water out of this one as well, out of this system. I'll move on to Swalwell then, the next one. So this is one of our hamlets. It used to be on wells up until about 2008 when Gamble was put into commission, and then we started receiving the water through there, decommissioned the wells. There is a bulk station here in Swalwell, and this one also services the Swalwell Dam campground. Just around the dam there, we have a few lots, so there is water service there as well for our residents or users of that site. So as part of our infrastructure plan, Swalwell was one of those ones that we did complete. So in the next little while here, those will be brought to council for your information. So overall, the water system, everything seems to run all right. There is some issues with the sewer lines and stuff just because of the age and the type of pipes and that sort of thing. They aren't as robust. So, but that'll all be kind of brought forth to council at a future date here for your information. Our next system is our Selkirk Waterworks system. Again, this is underneath that Kneehill Southern Rural. This reservoir and pump house is located just south of the village of Acme, just off of Highway 806, and we're on the east side there. We do have a bulk water station there as well for the residents, and there's approximately about 213 kilometers of HDPE pipe on this, and our reservoir, as you can see, is an above-ground reservoir, and there's about 630 cubes of capacity there. So when I have capacity on there, just kind of, our water, we can only recharge at a certain amount, right? So when I talk about bulk stations, I'll kind of touch that a little bit more, just to kind of, give you a little bit of information on that. But yeah, so I don't know if you guys have driven by there, but that's just south of Acme. Our Granger Waterworks system is our last one that's under the umbrella of the Kneehill Southern Rural System. This one is services our southern portion of the county. It began operations in 2010-ish, Actually, I think that one was a little bit early, 2009. Again, water is received through the Aqua 7 Regional Water Commission. We have approximately about 178 kilometers of HDPE pipe in that network. We have an above-ground capacity in our reservoir of 400 cubes. This one does not have any bulk water system, and it's located about a couple kilometers off of Highway 21 down south, near the, close to the border of our southern border. So our next system is, again, I lumped them all into one, and I'll kind of explain why, but this is 3 separate systems under one umbrella of our Sunny Slope Waterworks system. So we have Sunny Slope Gravity, Sunny Slope Pressure, and Hamlet of Torrington. So why this is lumped into kind of one is because we only have one reservoir for all of these systems. Well, except for Torrington as they're separate, but the headworks of it. So it's also one of our larger areas, but with one of our smaller reservoirs. So the Sunny Slope Gravity system was it was our original system. You may have heard of it being called Linden North. That's our gravity system. So Aqua 7 comes in at the point is at a Linden pump house actually, and from there it's pumped up the hill to where our reservoir is, and then from there it's gravity fed to all the residents back towards Linden and surrounding area. From that pump house in north, we pump it up through that reservoir and those pumps in there. We pump it all the way up to north to Highway 27, almost east to Three Hills, and west. I guess Torrington would be the furthest west that we go. So that's pumped up to there. There is no bulk water station at this reservoir, but there is one at Torrington. This system also supplies the Keevers Lake campground with its water as well throughout the year. Yeah, so this one's kind of, like I said, started off with the gravity, pressure, hooked on Torrington. So next one is the Torrington system. So again, this one is serviced through that southern rural system. So you can see on the right, this is located just on the north side of the Highway 27. From there, water comes in, fills up the tanks there, and then we push it out into the hamlet. So this hamlet does have fire protection. We do have a fire pump inside, so we can maintain those pressures and all that kind of thing. We do have a bulk water service on this one. This one is restricted, as well as Swalwell are restricted a little bit more than our rurals for our reservoir levels when they shut off, just because we have to maintain a certain capacity for firefighting needs, resident needs, and that sort of thing. So you'll see this one, if you use our bulk stations or anything like that, you'll see that this one shuts down probably more often than the others, just because of that requirement. The Torrington site, they used to run on ground wells until about 2011, when this reservoir and pump house were built and the connection from Sunny Slope was made. Those groundwater wells were decommissioned, put out of usage, and now we're strictly on to our surface water.
We have a question. Go ahead, Councillor Olson.
So was there an issue with the groundwater wells, or they just, because we went to this system, they were decommissioned? Because wouldn't it be prudent to have like that backup water source, or?
Right, so through the chair, I'm not sure of the water quality at the time. I'm gonna guess like any groundwater probably was high in certain minerals or that sort of thing. There was also the opportunities, usually at that time, to have grants to bring rural water to a urban center, like a hamlet and stuff like that. So I think the advantage of those grants were used to bring it to Swalwell, to bring it to Torrington and that sort of thing at that time. When you stop using a groundwater well, the Alberta regulatories, they usually want you to decommission those wells. They don't want you to have both systems working at the same time. I know there is some municipalities out there that have kept them, and they may have worked out a deal, or they may not have a deal, but still have them. But they do, even actually private, like if you hook onto our water line, Alberta Environment wants you to shut down your wells, but that's not that I'm gonna enforce, but, so there is rules behind that of having the two separate types of systems running at the same time.
Thank you.
So our next slide there is all about our bulk water systems. So we operate 5 bulk water systems on our Churchill system, Gamble system, Selkirk, Swalwell, Torrington, and Trochu. We don't have per se a system at Trochu, but Trochu is off of the town of Trochu's distribution. It's just our building within Trochu, and so we could supply our residents in that area with that water. So we operate the bulk station part of it, but Trochu operates the water supply side of that. Our bulk water sites, they are controlled by reservoir levels, as I kind of touched on a little bit. We do have to maintain a certain level in those reservoirs, so we have water for our residents, water for our, other users, that kind of thing. In the towns, in the hamlets, we also, not only for the residents, but we also have to have fire flow still available, fire levels still available. So you'll see at times these bulk stations will shut down, and they'll shut down because of reservoir levels, not, there could be times when there's a mechanical issue and we have to shut them down for repairs, but most of the time it's shutting down because of reservoir levels. We have to wait until those levels reach another certain set point. That does take some time because we can only recharge our reservoirs at the rate that Aqua 7 can supply us water. And unfortunately, that is a lot less than what can be released through the bulk stations. It's usually around 8 liters a second, 10 liters a second, that kind of thing. So it does take some time for them to recharge. So we did try putting in place a system. In the beginning, it started with the bulk stations for Notify Me, and that was to kind of let people know if they signed up that, hey, maybe this is closed down, alter your plans, and don't waste your time, go somewhere else. So, because it is quite a distance between the bulk stations, so it is an inconvenience. So these do operate 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, unless they are down for whatever reason. So they are operational through the winter months, summer months, so they're available to all residents at that time. Some of our latest stats are that we have about 329 active bulk water accounts. Of those, about 210-ish are ag users, 96 are industrial users, and 28 or so are around internal users. So that's like, for example, us or operations, or I believe the fire departments and stuff are all included in those internal accounts. So those are, if we're doing sewer line flushing or something, then that's our internal account we use for that water, that kind of thing. So how we determine that is, it's nothing really scientific. We just kind of, I guess it's based off names. We don't really have anything where they state if they're an ag or a commercial user, but we do just through knowing people and companies, that's how we broke down the ag and the industrial. So our next slide is our wastewater lagoons. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have 4 wastewater lagoons. These are at our hamlets. These again are under a code of practice for wastewater lagoons, when we can release, how we release, what parameters we have to maintain to release. So we have 4 of them. Huxley, I don't consider too much as a lagoon in the term as a lagoon. It's more of a settling pond. We don't actually receive solids in there. It's more evaporating the liquids from those septic tanks that come from Huxley, which is only liquids. So and we also don't actually really have a controlled way of releasing that lagoon. We'd have to probably siphon and go overland to release that. The Wimborne Lagoon acts as a evaporation pond as well, although it is a lagoon itself. My time here, we have never released Wimborne. We do have a little bit of an issue with that if we did ever have to release it. So we do have some contingency plans of overland releasing, just because downstream there's a fish pond. So if we release that lagoon, we may affect that private fish pond. So how that came into play, unfortunately, it is there. So, but we never had to release Wimborne as well. But if we ever did, we do have a contingency in place if we had to come to that. Our other lagoons, Torrington, part of the infrastructure upgrades, it runs and operates fine. We do have a few issues that eventually will have to be looked at to, to see what can be done about it. We have the outlet valve doesn't work. When we release it, we actually do siphon this one into the creek. That's not the greatest way to do it, because if you go too fast, there's a potential of, doing some damage to the berms because you're releasing too quick. Obviously, gravity takes over. We also have the two ponds at the top. That stabilization valve in between those is a little bit on the side of needing repairs. So there are some issues with the lagoon, but overall it operates as it should. It operates, treats that water as it should. Releasing it is no issues. Swalwell Lagoon, this one was actually upgraded in 2012. It's operating just fine, kind of thing. The new liner, there's the new valves, so it's operating fine. So that one, there isn't too much issues. It should be good for quite a while now. Our next slide, just to touch on, yes.
Councillor Olson has a question.
Sorry, with regard to the releases, are these just legislated releases, or is this based on waterfall and those kind of emergency type releases?
Right. So through the chair, we can only release during certain periods of the year through the code of practice. Usually it's in the springtime and then in the fall time. And you can only release for 3 weeks. Other than that, if you release outside of those dates, you need to get special exemptions through the regulatory body. And it's probably a little bit more stricter on what you need to test, how much you can flow out and stuff like that. So if there's an emergency, there's definitely an avenue to go. But regular releases are done through the code of practice. Good. Our next slide here, I just wanted to kind of touch base a bit on our transfer sites. So we do own and operate 4 transfer sites. Our residents do have access to 2 additional transfer sites. Those transfer sites are in Trochu and in Acme. So just through agreements with those municipalities, our residents can access all the services at those sites as well. Vice versa on our sites as well. For example, with Linden and Carbon, Linden, the Village of Linden residents and the Village of Acme residents can use our Linden site, as well as Carbon residents can use our Carbon site, and that's through agreements. So there is a bit of monetary give and take there for those access rights to those. So they still have to follow the same rules and guidelines set out by our residents as well. So they can't just bring anything there. They have to bring what's allowable and what's not. So just for a little bit of information, so our Carbon site is our smallest site. We only offer basically household garbage collection there and some cardboard recycling. We get about 30, 50 residents per day. It's only open 1 day a week, and that's on Saturdays from 9 to 5. So we do actually get quite a few residents for being open such a short time. As well, the Village of Carbon uses our site to offload their hamlet, or I guess village collection. They use that site, and I'll get into a little bit later, but through the Drumheller Solid Waste Commission, they come empty our bins and take it out to Drumheller for that. Our Linden site is one of our busiest sites. It's anywhere from 70 to like 100 people a day, depending on the day. As well, Village of Linden uses this for their hamlet collection, as well as their commercial bin collection and that sort of thing. They use our bins, and again, the Drumheller Waste Commission, through their contract, picks up that garbage and hauls it off down to the Drumheller landfill. The Linden transfer site offers one of our more, that with Torrington offer kind of our more of an array of items that are collected. We do scrap metal, tires, white metal such as fridges, stoves. We have a burn pit there. We have electronic waste recycling, paint recycling. So we offer quite a lot of services at the Linden site, and that site is open 3 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So it is one of our busier sites. Our next site to touch on there is our Three Hills site. So it's our most centrally located site, but it also offers probably a mid-range of acceptable items, just a little bit more than carbon. So obviously your transfer, your household garbage, twine, that's where the ag users can drop off their bags of twine for recycling. We used to collect the jugs there, but in the year past there, that switched to the manufacturers collecting that. And we have cardboard recycling there, we have newsprint recycling there. This is the site that we also brought in our tin plastic recycling as well. So that's been a 30 cube yard bin, and it's actually been fairly well used, I think. So it's a service that wasn't around for our residents, but in the last few years, we brought that in for them. Our Torrington site, we usually get in around the 60 to 90-ish or so residents a day. This includes all our recycling options as well as the landfill. So that's where our Class 3 landfill is located. And I say Class 3 because it's limited to the material that can go in there. It has to be inert material, so basically rubble. You can't put any organics, any liquids, anything like that in that landfill just because of the way it's constructed. There's no liner, but we do have to monitor the groundwater. So if anything starts getting in the groundwater, then we have some reclamation to take care of. At this site, it's like Linden, we offer the recycling of scrap metal, white metal, tires, paint, electronic waste, cardboard, newsprint. So there's quite a variety at that site as well for it. This site's only open twice a week. It's only open Wednesdays and Saturdays. So on that transfer sites, there is a program that's kind of been instituted, and it's kind of evolving as we go here, and it's called the EPR program. And that program is basically putting the responsibility, the financial responsibility, back on the producers of these recyclables, such as tin, plastics, eventually glass coming up soon. And they are going to have to organize, coordinate a recycling program for those materials. Things like tires and scrap metal and e-waste, that falls outside of this program. This EPR program is only for those produced tins, plastics, and that sort of thing. So there are going to be some changes. Circular Materials is the designated outfit that's kind of doing this coordination implementation, and they are going to basically kind of assess as they go. They do have a mandate from the government to collect a certain percentage of these materials. So let's say, for example, plastics, they're mandated to basically collect 80% of that material that's going out. So they have to make sure that they have enough collection sites, accessibility to maintain and get to those mandates of the percentages they need to collect. So we'll see maybe some changes in the future of where things can be collected and where things can't be collected, but unfortunately that's going to be a little bit out of our control because they're the ones that are going to be instituting where these things might happen. So we'll see. More information will come for that, as it's still an evolving program. And on that note, I guess we already institute Hamlet garbage collection. So as part of this program, if we had Hamlet garbage collection prior to 2022, I think it was, they are now going to be eligible for Hamlet curbside recycling collection. So that should hopefully be coming up here in the next year or so, where they will then be able to recycle at curbside, only in Hamlets, unfortunately. And I did mention we do have the burn pits at two of our sites, Linden and Torrington. These ones are also regulated of what we can actually accept there. It's basically just clean burning materials. If you have trees, things like that, we can burn. But if you're bringing in, let's say painted fence posts, we can't burn paint, right? Basically, if they see black smoke, they know there's something being burnt that's not supposed to be in there. And then we can get our hands slapped for burning prohibited materials. So we do have to make sure that what's going in those is acceptable. We do follow any burn bans. So if the fire chief committee, if they put on a fire ban, we follow that. We don't burn, and we try not to accept any material in those sites because it does overburden them. So we do try to put it out there on our channels that, hey, our pits are closed until such time the fire ban is over. We do also apply for burn permits before we burn it. And we also do have to notify Alberta Environment when we're burning as well. So we do have a few notifications that we have to do prior to burning it, so. So we don't just go and throw a match in whenever there is some things we have to follow, so. So our next slides, this was the information that we kind of put together and we presented to prior council, but I thought it would be good to also have it presented to you. And this is basically our water revenue to our expenses. In these, there is a, and again, there's no 2025 because I don't have all that full numbers of how much water we purchased, how much we didn't purchase. I could go up to the end of October, but I left that out for now. But when we figured this out, there is a standard type of water loss that is always calculated inside of this. It can be anywhere, depending on the ages of systems, from 10% up to 40%. We went with a 10% loss of amount of water. And that loss of water can be from anything. It can be from water line breaks. It could be from operational use, such as flushing water lines. It could come from theft. I mean, there's always that possibility. And it can also come from just our operational things. I mentioned the flushing, but also some of our systems use water as well. So there's always some loss, either through some form. So we use the 10% for that. Our revenue is usually generated through the water billing process, penalties on those water billing, fees for contracted services such as with Aqua 7, that sort of thing. Our expenses, some of our bigger expenses is the water purchasing from other municipalities and our salaries. As well, there's the utilities for running those systems, power, heat, that sort of thing. Yes?
Mr. McCook has a question.
Yeah, I just noticed on your slide here, you're calling a loss of subsidy?
Sorry?
You're calling a loss of subsidy on your sheets here? Where your total water revenue and your total water system expenses and total water system subsidy?
Yeah, so there's going to be a bit of a difference there, right?
That's a loss.
Overall.
Correct.
But that's, yeah, there's contributing factors to that too, right? I mean, some of our systems aren't at fully capacity, right? So we have, some systems we have another 60% that we can capacity. So, but we're still incurring costs for attending, for running those things and stuff like that.
But it's still a loss. So like since 2020 to 2024, there's probably $3 million that the taxpayers have had to pay. One of the things is that I have a concern about is these systems, are they actually paying for what they for the system? When we have people that don't have water, or we have farms that we pay for everything, we pay for our own wells, we pay for our own sewers, and now are we subsidizing that loss? And the answer would be yes. Correct?
Yes, through the Deputy Reeve to the Reeve, we do subsidize water through our water rate. So that is a council decision through our water rate bylaw. So council has the opportunity to increase those fees should they in the future. But yes, as according to John and what he was indicating is not all of our systems are fully capitalized yet, and they will be in the future, we imagine or hope, and we don't have, I'll get a plan from John on that. But council has made the determination to subsidize water, and it is a full county bylaw because of the fact that we have hamlets and we have urban. We have rural and hamlets. It's quite common within rural municipalities that there isn't a break even on water.
It probably is quite common, but my taxpayers are asking these questions. When they have to pay their own stuff and these towns and villages we're subsidizing them, there is a question. So I think it's something that we got to look at.
Through the Deputy Reeve to the Reeve, we had prepared a report on our water that we can bring back in the new year that we hadn't brought back.
Oh, yeah, through the chair, this was from USPA did. I know that Ms. Von Burbach, she actually has a little Excel thing that she prepared where she can actually input rates and stuff, and she can show you the differences and stuff like that. There's many options to go through the rates. You can look at high consumption users, increase rates on that kind of thing. You know, one of the tough things with the rural system is that you have, you know, 10 kilometers of pipeline and you might have 5 residences on it that are hooked on, whereas in a town, if you have 10 kilometers of pipeline, you probably have like 1,000 people on that. So that's where there's a bit of, I guess, subsidizing going on, right? Because there isn't that amount of users on the line. But.
Okay. Councillor Whitstock, did you have a question?
No, I didn't have a question. I was just going to say that yes, the water is subsidized. It is subsidized in most well, I think it's subsidized in all municipalities, to be quite honest with you. And the reason that we have our water rates where they're set because they are competitive with water rates in other municipalities. I guess if you were to raise the water rates, I'm not sure if we can, well, I mean, you can raise the water rates, but it'll come down to, are you going to lose connections?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Olson.
Yeah, I think, you know, where Lonnie was looking was, does the guy that drill his own well and run his own water lines and whatever for his system, is he getting subsidized for that drilling of that well and maintaining of it? I think that's where Lonnie was going with that.
Okay.
Good. All right. Yeah, so then we can go on to the next slide, and this one is our wastewater revenue to expenses. And again, this one is a little bit tough, again, because our rates for charging sewer are all over the place. We did, in that report, we did bring forth a kind of more of a straight line kind of a system based off how much water you use is how much you pay for your sewer. These are only within the hamlets. These aren't anything rural. So within the hamlets, this is done. Our revenue is generated through the monthly fees that we charge, and expenses, again, are salary, sewer main flushing. We do put in Actizyme, which is basically something that promotes the health of the lagoons and stuff like that. There's the fuel and there's lab testing that kind of all go into expenses on that. Again, these are our four wastewater systems in the Huxley, within Torrington, within Swalwell, and within Wimborne. Again, this one can be looked at where you can look at a different fee-based model, where it's based off water used, is based off how much you're going to be paying. Normally, a lot of municipalities, they'll use the 80% cutoff, where 80% of the water you use is going to probably go into our lagoons. So 80% is then charged at whatever rate is determined, kind of thing. So I put those in there for information. Like I said, it was presented to council last time, so I put it in here so that the new council would also have a quick overview of it. If needed, we can bring that whole presentation back, but these were kind of the, I guess, a couple of the main things. Just a little more information would probably be how things were figured out, what could be done, and things like that was more into that presentation. But if that's something that council's looking for, we can definitely bring that back. Our next slide is some of the projects that we're currently doing, what we're looking at, and that sort of thing. So, as I've mentioned a couple times, they're almost basically complete. We're just in the final draft area now of Swalwell and Torrington infrastructure master plans. And this basically looked at our infrastructure that we have currently, what the growth rates are, and if this can complete it, what our risk factors are. So they have a risk-based matrix that they go through, and they will outline future capital needs for that replacement, how it can be done if it's a full rebuild or if it's a, for, let's say, sewer lines, if it's just a relining, that sort of thing. So they'll kind of, this will kind of have that plan and show many years into the future of what could be expected to maintain these services within the hamlets. Through this, they also water modeled these hamlets for fire protection, where there might be issues, that sort of thing. Based off of those, they came up with lifespan of water lines. There isn't really an easier way of putting cameras down in those lines, but they do it off of other factors that they put together and come up with a risk based on those things. So those will be brought to council at a future meeting here so that you can have that information on the state of that infrastructure and what possibly is needed or not needed and that sort of thing within those hamlets. A second project that's currently ongoing, I mentioned a little bit before, is that windboard fluoride system. And this is to reduce that naturally occurring fluoride, which is going to be regulated in the coming years here. Our second one is the Huxley wastewater upgrades, and that is that's ongoing and nearing completion as well. Some future projects, we do have SCADA HMI upgrades that are going to be presented as well. We have our Class 3 landfill cell development and construction. So in this upcoming budget, you'll see some money for the development of the cell and the application for that. That application does involve having stamp drawings and that sort of thing to be submitted as part of that. So the development will be done with a outside engineering firm. Get those, apply for it, and then the construction hopefully the following year if it all goes the way we need. As well, in this upcoming budget, you'll also see a project for roll-off bins. This is just to kind of bring our service that we offer at our Class 3 landfill maybe further down to residents that's a little bit more accessible, a little bit closer and that sort of thing. We're going to start off basically at one of our sites that has a tenant there, so we have some supervision over these bins. It is a program where it can be abused, so we'd like to make sure that it's supervised. So we'll bring that in just as kind of this year it will kind of be a project, see how it's received, how it goes, and then if it's something that is positive and council believes is positive, then we can put it into our regular operating budget. So on the radar, we do have, through those master plans, there will be some replacements or rehabilitations that are requested. So that would be something that would be obviously brought back to council for discussion and decisions and that sort of thing. We're also looking at maybe doing the same plans that we did in Swalwell and Torrington, but in Huxley and Wimborne. They'd obviously be on a little smaller scale because of the size, but again, that would give us a path forward for many years of what is going to be needed to keep providing those services within the hamlets. Another one that's on the radar, like I said, you're not going to see it in the budget next year, but maybe potentially in a few years, is the Sunny Slope Pump House and Reservoir upgrade. And the reason for this is that the size of this reservoir, the size of this pump house, it is limited. Like I said, it's kind of one of those ripple effects where getting water to Torrington is probably not as quick as it can be, and so we have to regulate that. So that trickles down to that bulk station not being able to open as quick because it just goes through too many systems. It's our largest system with our smallest size of pump house and reservoir as well. So another one that is there is our bulk fill station infrastructure and software upgrades. We are running off of infrastructure for our bulk station, like our panels and stuff. That may be closing in on the end, not offering what maybe we can do. And maybe we could offer more checks and balances in our bulk stations and stuff like that, but not with this one. But like I said, they're operating fine as they are, but maybe in the future there'll be better technology and better infrastructure put in place. So that kind of concludes a bit of an overview of our department. So if there's any questions or anything like that, I can definitely answer those.
I guess I have one question, comment, concern. The upgrade in Huxley that's happening right now, it seems to be very slow. So is there anything you can do to hopefully speed the contractor up? Because winter is here, and I understand it was cold last week, but looking at the forecast, he's got some nice weather to hopefully get that wrapped up as quick as we can.
Through the chair, it's kind of changed. Unfortunately, late last week, we were notified that the crew no longer works for that contractor. So we're having a little bit of issues now with getting something from this contractor. But I think that we're gonna look on, what they've done now so far is done. And our crews in the springtime or something, we clean up, get things back, but our crews can do those couple connections that are left instead of waiting on this contractor to come up with a new plan. So it's unfortunate, and sometimes that happens, but we're gonna probably deal with it the way and go forward from it, unfortunately. But, so it's on a bit of a unfortunate standstill at this time.
Okay, Councillor Olson?
So regarding that, then how are the funds transferred? Do we have a holdback on that, just so we can, you know, get some repercussion on that?
Right. There's been no funds actually spent to that contractor yet, because it was only supposed to be a week or two project, and then it was just gonna be expensed after, so we haven't expensed anything. There's things in the contract that maybe we can penalize. We'll see what we can do on that side of things, but we would only pay for what's been completed up to this time, so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCook, did you have a question?
Yeah. When did you hear about this?
Late last week.
Okay, that's prior to, before these reports come out, because it wasn't in these reports?
It was basically Friday morning when I got the phone call and said that.
Yeah,
Because I
you-
was there Wednesday and there was an operator there warming up his backhoe. And I guess after that, nobody showed up after that. Then Friday, we got the call that, yeah, their crew basically doesn't work for that company anymore, so.
Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And, yeah, I guess we need a motion.
I'd move that the Committee of the Whole acknowledge receipt of the Environmental Services presentation as presented.
Any discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. At this time, my watch is telling me to stand up, so we'll take a little short break. All right, welcome back at 10:40. We'll move on to item 2.3, policy review schedule. You can stay there, wherever you want. Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve and Council. I'm bringing forward, as requested in the last council meeting, a discussion on our policy schedule so that council can give us direction on what policies they'd like to come forward first. We have drafted a schedule based on the policy terms and the timelines, and we're looking for council to provide us with guidance or direction on whether or not this schedule is okay or whether they want some changes. And I'll leave it up to you to tell me.
I have one question, concern. I know in the past, there has always been a council strat plan, couple of days. I don't know if that's an option for us, or if it's, I feel a couple of days of strat plan would help us determine what we need to prioritize, put forward first. I don't know if that's an option for us, but just a thought I had.
That was my first thought too, but whether we call it a special meeting or whatever we do. I mean, I can see here that I got 15 things right now I'd like to see right away, but they may not be a priority for the rest of the guys, or council, pardon me. And so we should be looking at a meeting like that, talk about the direction that we're gonna be going, how it's gonna affect us, and that's the stuff that we need to actually discuss and get going for you guys right away.
Go ahead.
Through the Deputy Reeve to all of Council and Reeve McCook, sorry, I think that is a preferred idea for us administration, is to have council go through a strategic planning session so that you identify your key themes and where you want to focus on for the next 4 years. From there, it might make more sense as to which policies might align, and I'd be happy to set that up for you in the new year.
I would agree with that. Councillor McCook?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And one of the things is we have to, I think if we don't have a strategic plan, I mean, the one that we're working on right now, it ain't aligning. So we need to get onto that one.
Any other thoughts, concerns? Okay. So I guess at this time, do we table this issue?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
To a further, after January meeting.
To the, yeah,
After our strategic plan.
after a strategic plan, yes.
We'll give Candace a few seconds to update the motion for you.
Recommend to council to table. Table. Okay. Yep, I think so. That'll work. Councillor Cunningham.
I'll move that the committee of the whole recommend to council to table the approval of the 2026 to 2029 policy review schedule post-strategic planning session in January 2026.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, new business 2.4, road committee policy creation. Councillor McCook.
Yeah, I asked for this to be brought forth here. I'd like to table this till that meeting also, until we get a better direction on which way we're going. Also, if you want to talk to me after for input, this is just a rough draft that Carolyn threw out, and it's not really how it's set up, but we can discuss that later. But as far as this goes, I'd like to table it till the next January meeting, if that works.
Yeah, pretty much the same motion. Can you copy and paste?
We do have some updates anyway, because Carolyn produced it.
Yes.
Oh, you're, yeah.
We didn't hear you.
Yeah. And Councillor McCook, would you like to make that motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that the committee of the whole recommend to council to table policy 3.5, road committee policy, post-strategic planning session into January 2026.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And I guess item 3, closed session. Do we have anything to discuss?
I don't have anything to present in here, but one of the things that was brought forth to me by about 4 more ratepayers the other day is we gotta be careful when we go into a closed session, because they're very, very suspicious of what's going on. They understand what was happening here earlier, but we don't need to go into I shouldn't say we don't need to. We want to make sure that we don't have to go into closed session if we don't have to. One of the concerns that I had, and I'm not sure why it was, but when we were discussing, for an example, the fire truck, I'm not sure why that had to be in closed session. Or maybe I was missing something, or was it because of dollars and cents?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dollars and cents and involving a third party that wasn't at the table
Okay.
to
good
discuss
enough.
that. So
Yeah,
that would be.
That
the
was just a
reason.
comment.
But once that decision's made, then it's part of the budget, so, yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else to bring to the table, call for adjournment. Meeting adjourned at 10:47. Thank you.